The Subnautica games are a series of open-world underwater survival games developed and published by Unknown Worlds Entertainment. Set on the fictional planet 4546b, the original Subnautica follows the story of Riley Robinson, the only survivor of the crash of the Aurora. As he tries to survive on the alien planet, investigate the crash, and return home. The player takes the role of Riley Robinson and follows his journey. After Riley wakes up and finds himself stranded on planet 4546b, he becomes aware that the planet is fully covered in water, with small islands at various locations. Riley is free to explore the rich life and mysterious underwater areas near the crashed Aurora. After some exploration, he is capable of finding traces of highly intelligent alien species. Realizing he himself is not the first visitor of the planet, Riley must uncover the secrets connected to the mysterious alien species, later called the Precursors. He must investigate and solve the mysteries surrounding them if he wishes to leave the planet. Neither the Precursors nor Riley ever mention or find any evidence story-wise, but he and the Precursors might not be the first inhabitants of this planet, and that planet might have looked entirely different hundreds of thousands of years ago. Evidence and traces can be found hinting that the planet might have not always been 99% covered in water. But before we dive into that, we must first trace the events of the game. The Precursors arrived on planet 4546b in order to research and develop a cure for a virus that caused 143 billion deaths on their home planets, called the Kara. However, it did not go as planned, as they failed to keep the virus from spreading to the natural ecosystem on the planet, thus forcing them to leave by disposing of their physical forms and uploading their minds to data hubs. They also quarantined the planet by building a device named Quarantine Enforcement Platform, programmed to shoot down any space vessel trying to get close to the planet. Sometime after the events of the Precursors, perhaps decades later, the human space vessel Mercury 2 is forced down relatively intact by the Quarantine Enforcement device, landing on the planet. Several more decades later, it shoots down yet another vessel, called the Degasi, and then 10 years later, the Aurora. The game starts just after the Aurora crashes on the planet, with only Riley Robinson as the lone survivor. The game's story indicated that the Precursors are the first intelligent species to inhabit this planet. There is no known evidence or traces of any other civilization or intelligent species who lived on the planet. However, there is, or at least there should have been. Planet 4546b is located in the outer reach of the Ariadne Arm, orbiting around the star 4546. The B means that the 4546b was the first planet orbiting the star. On it, there are 3 major known ecosystems: the crater ecosystem, the Arctic ecosystem, and the void ecosystem, also known as the dead zone. The dead zone covers the majority of the planet. The crater and Arctic cover a small percent. Data left by the Precursors make note of high thermal activity from the planet's core, which indicates that the planet is going through a major planetary event of heating up, which, as we know, causes a planet's ice caps to melt and water levels to rise, thus suggesting that at some point the planet might have not been almost completely covered in water. But much like planet Earth, ice and land might have been much more present. Near the floating island in the Grand Reef, there is a strange structure covered in coral and sea fauna that can be found by the player. What is strange about it is that it has the traces of being an artificially made building, complete with rooms, corridors, shafts, and windows. Unlike the normal cave openings in the game, this structure's corridors, rooms, and shafts look much more symmetrical with geometrical proportions. The structure looks a lot like a residential building. It's almost as if hundreds of thousands of years ago, this area was land, but after major planetary changing events, the planet is now submerged in water and covered in corals. What is even more interesting is that this is not the only structure. There are many similar structures near it with the same features: corridors, shafts, rooms, and windows. This might be a little far-fetched, but one can imagine that the area with these structures might have once been a big metal or stone city hundreds of thousands of years ago that has sunk under the ocean. Another interesting piece of evidence of past civilization on the planet is in the primary containment facility. There are containment exhibits with relics collected by the Precursors. Some of them are from the Precursors themselves, but some are not. There is even one that is clearly collected from Earth, an ancient blade or sword that looks like it was taken from Earth during the Middle Ages. There are also some of unknown origin and do not look like they belonged to the Precursors. Perhaps they were collected during their space travels or discovered during the process of drilling the ocean floor on the planet in order to build the research bases. One of these relics is slightly different: the alien carving relic. Unlike the other relics, this one is not made out of a metallic material. It appears to be composed of an unknown natural fiber. It resembles an ancient artifact and appears to have been made by more primitive species. When scanned, the PDA information says it resembles a yin and yang kind of symbol. Perhaps the yin and yang symbol is of universal understanding. Thus, it may have been made by species other than humans. However, the alien carving relic is more different than the Precursors' preferred technology, and it being developed by a species that inhabited the planet is extremely slim, since there is not enough strong evidence supporting that theory. Perhaps there weren't any intelligent inhabitants on planet 4546b before the arrival of the Precursors, since it is never mentioned in the PDA data and never mentioned or hinted by the Precursors story-wise or otherwise. But there is another interesting thing that we have to point out. The strange building-like structures shown earlier in the video used to look way different in earlier versions of the game, much more resembling a home by and for unknown intelligent species. The structures even appeared to have architectural properties, and for sure were artificially made, since natural occurrences like these are too unusual to be real. There was also a small island with stone ruins near the Aurora. The ruins definitely resembled structures made by someone. These structures, just like the underwater buildings, look too unusual for them to be created by natural occurrences. And they were definitely not made by the Precursors, because there is no evidence of them ever using natural rock or fiber as building blocks. However, in later versions of the game, the Ruins Island was removed, and the underwater building structures were changed to look way more like natural occurrences, even though they still look quite unusual. Was there an ancient civilization on 4546b before the arrival of the Precursors? Did the planet wipe them when it started to go through big planetary changes? Or maybe the developers were working on adding traces of it in the game, but later decided to drop the idea? Perhaps, we may never know, but the evidence, especially in the early versions of the game, is there. Are there any more hidden pieces of evidence scattered somewhere throughout the different versions of Subnautica? Or was it left unknown for player discussion?